Tip number 4. All stories have a beginning, middle, and an end. Okay? This is helpful because sometimes after doing story videos for a certain amount of time, you think that you think of it in terms of just a story. So I'm just going to do a video and it's a story. But that story has to have a beginning and a middle and an end. It's best in a 3-act structure or a 5-act structure if you want to get fancy. But 3-act structures are typically the best way to do story videos. And usually at the front, in the beginning, part of your goal is to get the attention of the viewer to keep watching. That's part of the point of the beginning section is if you've got 15 seconds for viewers to watch something, and your job is to convince them to keep watching, what are you going to put in that 15 seconds? Sometimes people go, my name is this person, my name is, and we've been coming to this church for this long. Generally speaking, I try not to do that. I try to give some sort of a hook or something like that. Like, for example, my name is Tori and I'm 16 years old and I just found out I'm pregnant. So in that sentence, you automatically are like, oh, you're interested in what's going to happen next. Versus if she says, my name is Tori, I'm 16 years old. I've grown up in, Villa Park all my life. And, when I got into high school, I met this boy. And then, then it's like, well, I'm sort of not interested anymore because you haven't given me yet a reason to keep listening. But if there's something in the beginning that says, keep listening, there's something interesting coming, that's a good spot for the beginning. And then the other thing you could do in the beginning is you could do text that comes up that sets the scene for what we're about to watch. It's kind of like the intro to the video, like setting the scene or setting the stage or setting the mood. But that's sort of like what your beginning section is for. Then you go to your middle section, which is basically what happened. That's the bigger section of the video. And then you have your final section, which is the third section, which is like, here's what I learned. Here's my final thoughts. Here's what I would say to people in my situation. Here's what I would say to you, the viewer. Those closing final thoughts, final words. That's usually a really good final section in your 3-act structure. So you've got hook, what's going to make me keep watching. You've got what happened to the person, the long journey, and then lessons learned, what I would say, final words, section 3. So if you think of story videos in those 3 sections, it helps in terms of having it be something that's compelling and interesting to watch and has a good ending. Another bonus tip on this, by the way, good length for a story video is about 2 to 2.5 minutes. You get to over 3 minutes, you're pushing the viewer's attention, just unfortunately in our day and age, unless this story is so compelling that it convinces people to keep watching. That heroine person story that I did, that was a 5-minute video, and it flies by because it's just so fascinating what happened. She got pregnant. Maybe I won't tell you because maybe I'll show you this later in the breakout class, so I won't tell you what happened. All right, tip number 5. Use text to fill in holes in the story. So this happened, I went to Africa for a church called Christ Church in Oak Brook. Because they had been doing all kinds of missions work out in Africa, and they wanted to tell the church, here's what we've been doing in Africa over these past 2 years. So I went out with the missions team, and we were there for about 12 days. It was an awesome experience. It's one of the things I love doing, is being able to travel somewhere and tell people stories that in cultures I've never been a part of or don't know. But we went to Kenya in Nairobi, Kenya, and my job was to say, here's what we've been doing for the past 2 years. So I interviewed all these people, their stories, and it turns out it was kind of complicated. There was a church they were sponsoring. There was youth pastors and mentors that they were giving scholarships to for their schooling. They had a Christian school near a slum that they were helping sponsor and give money to. And it was kind of like a lot of stuff. And so we filmed all this stuff and kind of figured out what the story was going to be as we were doing it and kind of evaluating, okay, we have this story, that story. What's the overarch here in terms of what the main message is, all that kind of thing. And so in the editing, we used text, because we didn't have people saying this, to fill in gaps that we really needed in order for the story to make sense. So, for example, the beginning of the video starts by saying that in Nairobi, they live on less than whatever dollar amount per day, and like a large percentage of them live on less than $1 a day, and then we show the slum, and then later on we show text of what are all the things that Christ Church has been helping with. And then we have visuals of those things. Since we didn't have people really saying, Christ Church and naming a list off. So we just did a list with text and then used imagery that we had underneath that text. And that happens sometimes even in an interview where you get into editing and you realize, okay, I get from here to here and we're in good shape, but I don't know how to get from here to here. I'm missing something. And this also happened in that heroine story video. We needed a little bit more about what it was that Bethany Christian Services did that helped influence this girl's life. And so we put in text that all the things Bethany did while she was in prison and while she was out and before she went to prison and like sending letters and all this kind of thing. Because Lauren did not tell me any of this stuff because it just never came up in our story interviews, but Bethany knew about it. So we just added it as text and that filled in the gap from here to here. So that is tip number 5. Use text to fill in holes in your story. Tip number 6, this is the random one, okay? This is a lighting tip. And this tip is to put the key light, which is your main light. If you have a side angle like this, put the key light on the opposite side of the side angle. So here's the deal. So you're my side angle right here, okay? And I am being lit mainly by this light right here. Now, I am still lit over here because I have a backlight hitting me, but this is my key light. Now, if my main light was on this side right here, it would be flattening out my look, okay? And because it's here, you have more dimension on this side because this is a little darker, and then this is a little brighter. So it makes it more interesting looking from this angle than if this light was over on this side and hitting me from this way. So typically I always have it on an upper 45-degree angle coming down. So on the main camera angle, it's upper coming down at me here. So my shadows are going this way versus backwards or something like that. And I also typically will do a backlight coming in from the side here just to fill in this a little bit, or sometimes I'll do a little bit of a fill here. But that's tip number 6, random lighting one, side angle light on the opposite side. Now I learned this because in the same heroine video that I'm telling you about with Lauren, I showed it to one of my video friends who's in this, and it turns out I had lit her on this side, and he mentioned, oh, you should light him on the other side. And then I looked at my other videos where I had lit on the opposite side of the side angle, and I was like, oh yeah, that does look a lot better. So now I'm more conscious about if I'm gonna have a side angle, the main light is on the opposite side. All right, let's move on. Tip number 7, learn about light temperatures. Now this is a real kind of a nerdy one, but if you've only ever really shot video and edited video, and lighting is more of a sort of a secondary or third thing that you know, it's important for you to learn, at a bare minimum, that there are different colored light temperatures. So the sun, for example, is anywhere between 5,600 and 6,500 Kelvin. Light is measured in Kelvin. And basically, in a nutshell, light is either cool or warm. So warm is like candlelight and like tungsten light bulbs that you have in a lamp. Those are yellowish, so they're warm light. And then sunlight and some fluorescent lighting, that's cooler light. So it looks cool. When you're shooting with cameras, you have to tell the camera which color temperature you're shooting in. Some people do auto white balance. That's called your white balance. Some people do auto white balance, and then the problem is it could change depending on what happens if the person leans forward or whatever. But what's interesting is that if you change your white balance to be for like warm light, like tungsten light, like candles and light bulbs and stuff, then cooler light, like what we have cool lights on, like 5,600 Kelvin is what we're at. Cool light looks like blue when you make your white balance be for like warm light. So let's say we have yellow lamps around and we are going to use those for our lighting. Then it will look like normal white because you change your white balance to be for warm, light bulbs or candles. If you put a cool light in the background, a colder light, it will look bluish or have a bluish, it's leaning blue. And sometimes that's actually really cool looking. Sometimes it's fun to be purposefully have different color temperatures that you're playing with. Another thing you could do is, I have a key light that's cool, and I could change my side light here to be warm. So I could be at 5600 here, and if I want this side to be a warmer light coming at me, then I can make it warmer, like for example 3200 or 4000. This is 5600, which is cool, and then this is 3200 or 4000, which is warmer. And then I have a mixed color light temperature here. It's not like colors like blue, red, green. It's more like warm and cool. And sometimes that's fun to play with. Conversely, if you want all of your lamps in a room to look warm, and you want them to be in the shot, like if I wanted to put a lamp right here in my shot, and I want it to look warm, then I could light for my cool light here, and then this will look very warm because I'm telling the camera that white is this, and then that will look very warm. That's color light temperatures. Super nerdy, but it's interesting to play with. All right, let's go on to number 8. Have the subject rephrase the question. So when you're doing an interview and you say, hey, what's your favorite cereal? If they just go, probably Cocoa Puffs, I'd say probably Cocoa Puffs. That's hard to use that soundbite in your story because what you need them to say is, my favorite cereal is Cocoa Puffs, probably Cocoa Puffs. So teaching your subject to rephrase the question right in the beginning before you do any shooting is really helpful. Also, keep in mind that you need to be paying attention to that as you're doing an interview because you might need to remind them of that because as you get talking, they may completely forget that. And then you just have to say, oh, sorry, could you rephrase that as a sentence? And then they'll know what you mean because you talked about that at the beginning and we're good. So tip number 8, have the subject rephrase the question. It's a simple one, but it makes your script writing and your editing way easier if they're speaking in sentences. Tip number 9, shoot with at least 2 camera angles. So this may be obvious, but when you have 2 camera angles, like camera angle 1, camera angle 2, if I mess up something and I just want to restart that, I can just cut to the other angle and cut out the mess up. And it's very, very handy with cutting up somebody's interview. It's hard to go from, if you just have one angle, to a hard cut, or even a crop in is sometimes works, but it's not as smooth or seamless as cutting to a side angle like this. So I always try to do at least 2 separate angles. And even if the 2 angles are right next to each other, even if I've got 2 cameras here and one of them is a close angle and one of them is a wide angle, and we want to have the subject looking into the camera for some reason. Sometimes people tell their stories by looking directly into the camera. When I do that sort of a scenario, I still do 2 camera angles. I just have them look in the close angle. Because if let's say there was a wide angle right here, if I'm looking in the wide angle right here, you can tell in the close angle that I'm not really looking at you, and it's a little weird. But if I'm looking at the close angle, and there's a wide angle there, it looks like I'm looking in the wide angle because it's wider. So the line of sight is not as dramatic when it's wider. So it looks like I'm looking at both cameras when I'm looking at the close angle. So in those instances, I do 2 next to each other, and I say, look into the close angle, this camera right here. Otherwise, I'll do a side angle because I always like doing side angles, especially on a slider because it's nice. I have a motorized slider going right now just to try to be fancy. All right, so that's tip number 9. Shoot with at least 2 angles. All right? Is everybody with me? Everybody with me? All right. All right, so tip number 10. This is the final tip, okay? Tip number 10 is use more than one music track. Now, I used to, when I was starting out with doing story videos, I used to basically choose one track from like a stock video site or stock music site, and I would put that track underneath the whole story video and just say this will be the music. But what started happening was I would have stories where it would take like a dramatic turn at a certain point. Like maybe they started out kind of like happy or fun or fluffy, and it got like super serious, or like something happened that was dramatic or something like that. And I remember thinking, this music, in order to find a music track that works for fluffy and funny and dramatic, it kind of doesn't have any kind of mood. It kind of is like generic music. It's just like something in the background. And a lot of times generic music that doesn't really have a definitive emotional feel to it doesn't serve as good of a purpose as if you choose a music track that actually fits that section of the story. So if we're having fun and we're being fluffy, I might choose a higher energy or a fun music track. And then maybe I would end that track right before they introduce drama or something new that's gonna happen. And I would change the track, and then it just maybe slowly start to get more dramatic. And then maybe it gets more inspirational towards the end. But I typically, in a story video, will do 2 or 3 music tracks as the story travels through its journeys to try to more specifically emotionally match what it is that this should feel like, rather than using just one music track the whole time that's maybe a bland, blah, general pad or something like that. So that's tip number 10. Use more than one music track. What do you say we do a little recap of the tips? See if we got them. Here we go. Tip number 1, supplement your weaknesses. Find out what you're good at, what you naturally like, or what you feel comfortable with. And then also identify the weakness. What is the thing you're the weakest at, or you are stressed by, or you doesn't come naturally to you? Find somebody else to help you with that, whether it's a volunteer or a subcontractor or just another staff member. Hey, can you come do this because you're better at this than me? Maybe just for this one video shoot. And I would at least try it on one story video and see how it happens. Number 2, do a pre-interview. Call them up, put like 30 minutes to an hour down and say, hey, let me just call and do an interview with you. Write little notes on your computer from the interview, or have somebody else listen in and then they can do the notes. And then sort of pre-decide what's the story going to be and what's your shot list and how's this going to look before you even film it. Tip number 3, pre-plan a shot list after the pre-interview. And then we had the bonus tips of doing a shoot schedule and use stock B-roll for footage that you can't shoot yourself. Tip number 4, all stories have a beginning, middle, and end. Make sure your story, however you decide to use those 3 components, it has a beginning, it has a middle, and it has an end. And you know definitively what those sections are and how you're going to use them. Number 5, use text to fill in holes in your story video. So if you have information you need to convey that you didn't get from the interview or that came out later, use text, and then that can fill in that spot in the story. Number 6, put the key light on the opposite side of the side angle. So side angle here, key light's on the other end of this angle. Number 7, learn about light temperatures, that there's warm and cool, and when you set your camera to one or the other, what does it do with the other? And then maybe start experimenting with using different color temperatures, like a cool key light and a warm backlight, or a warm key light and a cool backlight, or whatever. Number 8, have the subject rephrase the question when you're doing the interview so that when you're filming them, they are speaking in full sentences about whatever it is that you guys are talking about. Number 9, shoot with at least 2 angles, if you can do it. At a minimum, if you can have a 4K camera, then you can punch into that. If you only have one camera, if it can be a 4K camera, and you put that in an HD timeline for editing, you can punch into that angle, and then that becomes a second angle. But I always like to have a side angle and a main angle as much as possible. And then number 10, use more than one music track. If the story calls for it and it's taking twists and turns or journeys, maybe use different music tracks for those different parts of the story. So that's it. If we have time, I'm going to play one of my videos for you, maybe the heroine video, to just show you how that one turned out. If we don't have time, I'm not going to do it. And I might also not do the heroine video. So we'll see what happens when this gets edited. I'll see you guys later.
My name is Lauren, and I've been addicted to heroin for 12 years. When I was a junior in high school, the group of kids I was hanging out with started taking Oxycontins. They were getting them from their parents' medicine cabinet. I had a cousin that was addicted to heroin, and she told me that heroin was a cheaper version of Oxycontin. So I suggested to this group of friends that we could just buy heroin and it'd be cheaper. It just snowballed. One day of using went to 2 to 3 to I have this habit that I'm maintaining, not realizing that's what it is. I have no more money in my savings account. I crash my car. I lose my jobs. And it was just one thing after the other after the other. I went from petty theft to robberies, multiple stints in county jail, 3 prison sentences, overdosing in a McDonald's bathroom, prostitution, and eventually drug dealing. I was just lost and irresponsible and scared. While I was prostituting, I found out I was pregnant. I was already staying in a motel. I already knew most of the people that were coming to buy the drugs. So one night, I was in my motel room and I got a phone call from a customer that wanted to come buy drugs. She came in. While she was waiting, I started getting really sharp pains in my abdomen. I thought that it was false labor pains, so I kind of tried to ignore it. And then it just very quickly progressed to, I'm definitely in labor. I could hardly move. She helped me get into the bathroom. I started running the water in the bathtub, and I can feel his head coming. And I stepped into the water, and I pushed. I screamed. I remember that very vividly. And he came out. I picked him up out of the water. I put him on my chest, and she drove me to the hospital. I stepped out of the car, and they drove away. And I walked into a hospital with a newborn baby in my arms. I was sitting in my hospital bed, and I Googled adoption agencies near me. Bethany Christian Services came up. I called them, and my adoption counselor came right away to the hospital. The main thing in my mind was I knew I was not ready to stop living the lifestyle I was living, and I knew, just as well as I knew that my son deserved the best home. The process of choosing a family was actually very simple for me. I asked her who's been waiting the longest, and she came back with 3 families. I didn't know their names. I didn't know anything about them. The 3rd family said, we don't care about the situation. We would just be so grateful. That's unconditional love to me. The day after my son's birth, I left the hospital and went right back to the way I was living. I went to sell someone some more drugs, and when I pulled up, I was surrounded by cop cars. I ended up going to prison for 18 months. Going to prison 2 days after my son is born just validates that placing him was the best thing I possibly could have done for him. While I was incarcerated, I kept in contact regularly with Bethany Christian Services. They were very supportive, and the adoptive parents kept in contact with Bethany, and through Bethany would send me letters and pictures and updates. I felt that I was part of it, even with being as far away as I was. Having the adoptive parents and Bethany's support helped me heal. It helped me become the woman I am right now. It gave me confidence and validity that in a sea of bad decisions, one good decision can change the whole trajectory of your life, your sobriety, your self-worth. It completely changed me for the good. Seeing him happy is amazing to be a part of. I couldn't ask for any more than that.